Hello, everyone. My name is Peter Onen, and thank you for joining us. You can find out more about me and the services that I offer on my website at peteronen.com. And today we have our special guest, Micki O'Brien. She is an alternative education leader, and today we're going to be talking about spiral dynamics. But first of all, I just wanted to give you a chance, Micki, to introduce yourself and let everyone know where they can get a hold of you.
Thank you, Peter. I'm excited to be here. You can get a hold of me at mickiobrien.com. And I offer consulting and coaching in alternative education and in neurouniqueness, and especially in leadership around those two areas. And I used to work at the Integral Institute with Ken Wilber. So that's part of where what Peter and I are going to be talking about. It came from that and my master's thesis in integral theory.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so everyone, we're going to be talking about spiral dynamics today. And I guess first off, what would be one sentence that you would describe what spiral dynamics is?
Spiral dynamics is a framework for understanding the development of human consciousness, including at an adult level. So kind of understanding where people are coming from in their worldview connected to where they're at in the development of their consciousness.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so that's a great synopsis. So now let's dive in. What is spiral dynamics? Where did it come from? And how has it evolved over the years?
Good question. Okay, and that's a big question.
Yeah, big question.
So let's start with developmental psychology. Looks at, so Maria Montessori started out, so she's the mother of developmental psychology, and she started out looking at how children developed. So the British had developed this belief that children were just little adults and they basically needed to be beaten into submission and were expected to behave like adults, especially when they were around adults. And Montessori watched children and saw that they went through different levels of development in their consciousness and their relationship to themselves and each other and the world. And she designed environments and curriculums that served that development. And that was very different from just believing that the two philosophies that had existed before really strongly in quote unquote civilized world. So we're not even talking about all the amazing connected developmental things that had happened in different indigenous cultures. But let's talk about, like, in the Western world, these are some of the things that happened. Either children were just bad and wrong and needed to be beaten into submission and civilized, or they were a blank slate and could just be filled with whatever the adults wanted to fill them with. So there was no acknowledgement of the beauty of each child coming into the world with this gift of who they uniquely were, and then how their culture, their community, their family, their school, the world of adults around them could hold a container for them to develop. So developmental psychology happened.
Okay, so you're talking about back in the day, Maria Montessori, she created developmental psychology, correct?
Basically. I mean, she created the Montessori method, and out of that was born developmental psychology.
Okay, perfect. Go from there now.
Okay, so, and the reason I bring all that up is because spiral dynamics is based in developmental psychology. It's just a good background to have. And it's the reason that I was attracted to spiral dynamics, because originally I was a Montessorian, and that made so much sense to me. And then I found spiral dynamics, which helped me take developmental psychology to the next level in my work. Okay, so there was a man named Claire Graves, and he fought in one of the world wars. And when he came back from fighting, he got a PhD in psychology and worked to handle the cognitive dissonance, which is when, how do you explain cognitive dissonance, Peter? It's like your belief and...
Yeah, how I would quickly explain cognitive dissonance is that new information that presents itself and conflicts with current existing information in your reality, in your mind, and it causes this discord.
Yes, yes. So he was having some serious cognitive dissonance because of what, like, he knew these really wonderful, amazing people of integrity, and he saw these horrible things that, like, people he knew were wonderful and amazing could do these horrible, awful things. And he had huge cognitive dissonance about that. That didn't make sense to him. So he started doing research, and he developed this framework, which is, we now call spiral dynamics. And it looks at that development of consciousness. And the reason this connects back to kind of addressing his cognitive dissonance is because when people are at whatever specific worldview or level of consciousness that they're at, and I'm going like this because I'm trying to illustrate, here's a level in the spiral as we go up. Okay, so here's a level. And at this level, like let's say this level is all about my people, my group, maybe my tribe, but that's not exactly that. It's just like my group of people. And anybody who's outside of this group is dangerous, and we should kill them. And from that worldview, I call that worldview red in tooth and claw. It's like, I'm just going to kill everybody that I don't consider to be in my group. And a lot of sort of gang mentality happens this way. And it helps you to understand, like, the reason I really found this useful is I was working with teenagers they'd been expelled from all these different schools, and everybody was thinking that there was something wrong with them. And I'd meet these kids, and they were so bright and so amazing. And like, many of them were in gangs, and they were really trying to have a group to belong to, but they would do these horrible things. And so I was like, there's got to be more to this, right? This is a good person that is amazing and bright and shiny and has something to offer. And at the same time, they're like doing these things that are horrible. And when I realized, it's a part of their worldview, their mindset, how can I support them to be healthy in their worldview and move? And so that brings me to, is it okay if I just now mention how the way that I got involved in studying spiral dynamics and integral theory, which we will talk about later, is I was working at, I was running an evening program at an alternative school. I kept seeing that it was a very progressive alternative school. And I kept being frustrated with some of the other teachers at my school because they were these amazing, bright people. I felt like they weren't giving the students, and keep in mind, I had a Montessori background. So Montessori is all about, you have the structures and the systems and the environments in place to support children's development, right? And then I'm at this progressive school, and we had amazing leadership. We had an amazing principal. And some of the teachers seemed really stuck. They just they wanted the kids to just be like, go with the flow. And they had this sort of like hippie, everybody has total freedom. And I saw that worked for the teacher and for the teacher's friends, and the teacher's spouse, but it didn't work for my students. It didn't work for them. They needed more structure. And because of my Montessori background, I kept wanting to offer them more structure. And I found I would get in these like crazy battles with these other teachers, and I loved them. So I was like, how do I explain this? And how do I figure out how to help these teachers work with these students? Because I knew there was just something, I had cognitive dissonance, right? And my mentor from graduate school invited me to meet Ken Wilber, to go to a very small talk Ken Wilber was giving about education. And I had studied so much Montessori education at this point, and I had thought about starting a Montessori farm school for adolescents. So I'm literally, this was really funny. Ken Wilber was sitting on a stool and I was literally sitting on the floor in front of him. So it was like this experience of sitting at the foot of a master, you know, like this Ken Wilber is an absolute genius. He's a master of how to frame things in the world. Like, and I find that when we can find a way to frame something, we just have so much more leverage. It's just, for me, it's such a loving kindness, compassionate way of being, instead of having to say somebody's bad, broken, or wrong, saying, oh, they're coming from this worldview. They're doing the best that they can from that perspective. It's like understanding a place where they're at.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting at his feet and we had this whole conversation about education. And I know this is the way I'm going to work with education from now on. Okay.
Yeah, I just want to mention, this is the big reason why we're talking about this, because this information allows people to understand their reality more. And when we understand our reality more and why things are the way they are, why people act the way they act based off of where they are on their path of evolution, it opens up this door to more freedom for all of us to just kind of understand and relax into that understanding about how life works. And then, like you said, use it as leverage.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm just thinking too, you had asked about the kind of the evolution of spiral dynamics.
Yes. How did that happen? Or what happened?
Ken Wilber was looking for a theory of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he read thousands of books and explored so many different philosophies and frameworks. And spiral dynamics became one of the foundational pieces of integral theory, which is literally a theory of everything, because it does explain that piece of how we develop up. And the reason it's called a spiral is because we start at the bottom, just being born. And this is not a hierarchy like this is better than this. This is a hierarchy of evolution and development. And so one of the things we like to say, kind of to provide more clarity, is we call it a holarchy, right? So like a hologram, you can take like one little piece out of something, and then that little piece becomes a whole nother map or a whole nother framework, right? You do like layers. Woo! It's kind of fun. It's a quantum playground. Okay, so we have this spiral that comes up, and in my mind, it actually is multidimensional. But for talking about it now, we're going to just think of it as like three-dimensional, because it's easier for our brains to sort of take it in that way. So you start at the bottom and you grow up the spiral. You start at one side and then you go to the next side and the next side. You keep going back and forth as you go around the spiral up. So one side is more individual focused and the other side is more group focused. And this is not to say that, babies are born with many brilliant things inside of them already and connections, to the universe. I'm not downplaying that at all. We just, in order to teach something, we simplify it, right? So born at a survival level, and then we move up, going back and forth between individual group. There's a magical, mythical level, which, if you know, like a lot of times children around the age of 4, but it varies too. Like some people spend very little time in survival and they move on to the next level. But in that magical, mythical level, it's like kids want to have everything is animated. Everything can talk to them. There's all this magic in the world, and they have swords and they're princesses and knights, and all these things are happening. And what I'm really going to talk about today are the top 3 levels before we go integral, because most adults in the Western world are at one of these 3 levels. And I want to make sure to say every level has a really healthy functional side, and every level has the potential to have a shadow, stuck, unhealthy side. And because I'm a really strengths-based person, and that's how I do my work in the world, I will keep coming back to the strengths. And it is important to mention the stuck shadow things, because all of this is contained within love and with the truth of who we are. It doesn't make somebody bad, broken, and wrong because they're stuck at a level of consciousness. They might not be engaging their strengths to the fullest, but who am I to judge? Because that's not my lane. That's not my business.
And
many people get to a level and stay there because it serves them.
Yes. And to be very clear, that is not what we're doing here.
Yes.
We are not laying out a map to judge people.
Weaponized. We're not about weaponizing.
Yes. We're simply getting this information out so that people have more tools in their handbasket. So,
and many of my teachers that I love so much, and I myself, we struggle with sharing information sometimes because we worry about that. We worry about the weaponization of what we're teaching.
Yes.
So if you find yourself using any of what we're teaching as a tool to like bang yourself or other people over the head, to hurt people, to make excuses for doing awful things, please contact us so that we can help you. Yeah. Because that it does happen. I mean, I don't want to say you're bad, broken, or wrong because you do it. I want to say, like, for some of us, that's part of our learning. And reach out, because we're here to help with that. That's a part of the development of consciousness. You know, what I'm asking is that you practice awareness around that. If you find yourself using any of this information as a tool to hurt yourself or someone else, please reach out to us, because that's not what it's for. Okay, perfect. So starting out with the magical worldview. I'm going to go a little higher than that. Yeah, let's continue on this path of what are the levels. So it goes that magical, mythical, and then it goes to the red and tooth and claw. And then it goes to right and wrong, good and evil. And that's a very group level of consciousness. So it's on the group side. And 30 to 40% of adults, and I know that that's really loosey-goosey percentage there. And the reason I give that big of a range is because it depends so much on what culture you're dealing with, and also because it's changed. When I first started studying integral theory, there were more people solidly at that worldview and not moving up. So right and wrong, good and evil. So the healthy sides of right and wrong, good and evil, like, all people have to go through this level of consciousness, and some people stay there and some people move on, and some people stay there for most of their adult lives, and they get there maybe when they're 14 or 16. So in their teens, usually. So that worldview is very structured. It's very community oriented. You play a role in your community. You always want to do the right thing. Everything is very black and white. It's very clear. Some people that are fundamentalists are at this worldview, right? It's very, very basic thing for them. It's right or wrong. It's good or evil. It's it's simple. This is where religion is. Some of them. For the most part, yeah. Yeah, a lot of, and you can make many different things into your religion. So people that are very clear that, like, this is right and this is wrong, this is good and this is evil, oftentimes they'll use whatever framework they've been exposed to. And there are whole cultures, whole religions that this is their primary thing. Okay. It's a structure, it's a hierarchy. On the healthy side, there's healthy authority, there's healthy hierarchy. And I'm going to mention here that, because this is one of the conflicts that happens between this worldview and many of the others, is that cooperation is 80% of what happens in a healthy living system, and competition is 20%. So both cooperation and competition are things that happen in a healthy living system. Many times in a hierarchy where there's an authority figure, there's not even space for those two things to happen that much, right? Because it's like, what I say goes. A really important piece in development for people with this worldview is that they develop a moral compass. This is a very moral compass level. There's a high level of morality here. So those are a whole bunch of the strengths. Some of the greatest challenges and weaknesses and sort of dysfunctional parts of this worldview is if you don't fit in the group correctly, then you are wrong. You are banished. You are a sinner. You need to be a man or a woman. You need to believe, or if you don't believe, then you're bad, you're evil, you're wrong, right? Like there's a very clear distinction. So people who are unique and different often can have a hard time when they're in institutions that are based on this worldview, when they have leaders or authority figures in their lives who are at this worldview. Can be dangerous.
Okay. So one thing I neglected to mention at the beginning of the show is that we plan on going further in depth with this information, just so that you know, and the purpose of today is really just to graze over it very quickly. There's a
so you don't want me to go so deep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's speed it up a little bit, and let's
Okay.
what's the next one beyond the right and wrong, good and evil?
It is scientific rational capitalism. So we're going from one side of the spiral to the other side. So it's very individual. Scientific rational capitalism, the strengths are that it's moving us forward beyond the superstitions that happen at right and wrong, good and evil. The strengths are entrepreneurship and innovation. It's very exciting and vibrant. There's a lot of excellence. There's a lot of drive. There's ambition. Many like new incredible things are created at this level of consciousness. Olympic athletes are often coming from this level of consciousness. You know, they're really going for it. The challenge of this worldview is that there's no moral compass. There's none. And it's ironic, since the worldview before this has such a strong moral compass, this worldview has none. With this worldview, there are winners and losers, period. So the dysfunctions at this worldview are even more pronounced, because you have to be moving and succeeding and winning. But at no time do you stop to measure the cost to anybody else. So people who are stuck in this worldview will often just use other people, because they sort of see there's no actual human connection at this worldview. It's like we use each other because it's a capitalistic model where we do this trading. And this, by the way, is all the Micki O'Brien version of integral theory, not of spiral dynamics, which is a part of integral theory. So please don't say that this is across the board how everybody does spiral dynamics.
Right. Okay. So why do we go from strong moral compass to all of a sudden we're expanding our consciousness and now we have no moral compass?
Well, we transcend and include. As we move up in the spiral, we're transcending and including what happened to us before. So hopefully, if we had a healthy experience at right and wrong, good and evil, we actually bring that moral compass with us. And here, this worldview, we're kind of getting more into ourselves. So one of the things that can happen at this worldview is we can get stuck in sort of a narcissism. And when it's healthy, we're moving out of the superstition and the limiting beliefs that existed in the worldview before us. So we move.
So a person that transcends through right and wrong, good and evil, without too much shadow or baggage, if you will, could actually emerge into capitalism with a moral compass and be healthy that way. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that can happen.
Okay.
What often happens when we first go into the next level is we're pushing back so hard against the level before to get ourselves to move.
And why do we do that?
Because the brain learns by the perception of difference. And so in order to rewire our brain to our new worldview, we're making a lot of distinctions between what came before.
Okay. And I see this all the time with people that are just now beginning the process of setting a boundary with something in their life. They're just simply making a choice, but they make it really intense and they push back from what they don't want. So you're saying that's what we do.
That's part of how we evolve ourselves.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So we experience contrast, we push back against it. And so we start to, oftentimes it's cognitive dissonance, right? We're just like, oh my God, I'm in this community and they're making all these things that I think are really cool. They're making them wrong. What do I do? And then you start to see like, oh, there's other options. And then you start to be like, oh, this is superstition. I don't want anything to do with superstition. So you start pushing against it. You start using like a scientific rational framework, or you start using a capitalistic framework. And one of the tells when a person's at this worldview is that they, at least to me, and I really want to own this because, you know, different people's typologies also look different as they go up the spiral. Like I'm a very community focused person. I'm a very heart centered person. So when I was going through the scientific rational capitalistic worldview, there were whole parts of it I left a bunch of shadow there because I just couldn't even figure out how to do it because it didn't make sense in who I am, because I'm so connected to other people and to life itself and to love. And this worldview, it actually gives us this opportunity to jump into this, like being this singular focus in the world that can get things done and do amazing things. Every worldview can contribute so much, and it can contribute so much in our development. And this is a worldview I have had to do a lot of work on because I skipped through it as fast as I could when I was a teenager. I did not like it.
Okay, so in a sense, you're pointing out to people that, you know, we hear this term all the time, shadow work. You know, you're talking about shadow work right now when you kind of are going along your path and you decide to jump over something rather than go through it. Eventually, at some point, you're going to be coming back, revisiting and doing shadow work, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's like no judgment, right? I mean, I did that because of my typology and because I come from an Irish Catholic social justice background, and, you know, that worldview didn't make a lot of sense to me and the culture that I was in. So I spent as little time there as I could and moved on. And in much of my adult life, I've been working on developing a healthier relationship with that worldview, and really largely so that I could serve better as a support person in leadership with other leaders and in my own leadership, because I believe we're all leaders and we have our leadership in our own way. We're leaders in our own lives. We're leaders in the lives of the people around us. We're leaders on the planet in our own way, connected to our own uniqueness. I can't help it.
Yeah.
One of my highest noble qualities. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So scientific rational capitalism. Okay. That's that level. Now we move to the next level, which is civil rights, social justice. And obviously, like the things about civil rights, social justice that are the strengths are so obvious. I mean, there's equality, there's opportunity, there's a lot of community at this level of consciousness. People are they want to be really connected. They want the whole world to be connected. They want that oneness. So it's delicious and it's amazing. And oftentimes because this is the last worldview before going integral, and it's a community worldview, many people get to this level and they don't quite make that quantum jump into integral. So they're at this level, and they live a really good life. It's just that because this is such a high level and it hasn't gone integral yet, it can be the bigger you live, the bigger the gifts and the bigger the challenges, right? So this is a bigger worldview and it has bigger dysfunction. That's just what happens, as we grow. And the spiral goes like this, right? It expands out, it gets bigger. And when we get to integral, we have this ability to move between the levels as long as we've addressed our shadow. When you're at this level, civil rights, social justice, often don't have that ability to move, and you're often pushing back really hard against scientific rational capitalism. So you can, if you just think about it, like think about people who do that, who are just like, no, this is the right way. So I am going to explain this without cursing. So be patient with me, because I usually curse, and we don't know who this video might get to, so I'm going to not do that. So.
Sure.
I mean, do you think I should? Should I curse?
I don't think it matters, honestly.
Okay, well, this is the way I explain it at this worldview. So I've been explaining civil rights, social justice, obviously, beautiful things here, right? When we get stuck here, we call it mean green a lot of times, about like when we get stuck here. And I'm owning this because I spent a lot of time stuck at this worldview. When we get stuck here, this is one of the tells, okay? Everyone is equal as long as they agree with me. And if they disagree with me, they're a motherfucker. Yep. They're just a total bastard. And so like people will be like, everybody has to be a vegetarian. Everyone does. It's going to destroy the planet if we keep eating meat, right? And I was like this. I was a vegan, and I was really sick because I'm totally can't process gluten, but I was eating massive amounts of gluten. So there's this whole martyr thing that can happen at this worldview, because we're like, this is the right thing. And so we'll martyr ourselves. And one of the reasons I engage in spiral dynamics so much in my work is because I believe helping us be healthy at our worldview and helping us move up the spiral actually can help us get to a place in our consciousness where we recognize and work with victim consciousness instead of letting it rule us. But this worldview can do victim consciousness when it's unhealthy or dysfunctional at like epic levels. Because it's like, no, this is victim, the man, like they're pushing back against capitalism, right? Where this the man is in control and doesn't care about and it's kind of true, at that level of consciousness, people don't have a moral compass, and if they didn't develop one, then there's just winners and losers. And so the people whose homes are getting polluted and that are dying from that corporation making huge profits off of the backs of the land and the people, they have people that are at scientific rational capitalism and stuck there and unhealthy. That doesn't fit in their worldview. They can't even see that. And then people who are at civil rights, social justice are pushing back against that. And that is a logical thing to have happen in a living system, a healthy living system, to have that kind of push back and forth. And if you want to get to a place where you can actually be in leadership and help these groups talk to each other and get beyond, Rumi has a quote, out beyond right and wrong, there is a field. I'll meet you there. And I believe from my experience, getting people to an integral level of consciousness is what truly serves that. And the way I've experienced it in organizations is to help the leadership in the organization be at that level and act from that level in a healthy way, so that they're not just, I've seen leaders just take down people that are stuck at certain worldviews. And if the leader's stuck at a worldview, what they'll do is they'll get everybody else in the organization to be at the same worldview. They'll fire and hire people according to that. So it limits everything. It limits all the opportunities of the organization, and it limits people's opportunities to expand and grow. And then again, nobody's bad, broken, or wrong. So that's just a part of life. It exists in the field.
All right. Well, that was a nice grazing over. We made it. We made it a little bit over time for what we were wanting, but that's okay. So this is great. I think this is a really good explanation of how we progress on this path of evolution. My last question, and then add in anything else that you want to say, and then we'll be done. So my last question is why do you personally, Micki, why do you want this information to be disseminated into the world more? Why do you want people to know this?
It's so personal for me because I just see so much suffering, and I see so many opportunities for people to be in their greatness, and they're caught in this suffering because they actually believe that where they're at in their consciousness is who they are. And until we get to an integral level of consciousness, it's often hard to actually be able to take that step back and be an observer's mind and be aware of how we get caught in victim consciousness. So it's really, really personal.
Yeah.
And also just evolving for humanity. I just believe that we have so much love and so much greatness and so much opportunity that I think this is one of the very best tools that I know for serving humanity.
Okay. Knowledge is power if you use it. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. And as a reminder, we will be doing more on this topic. And so stay tuned. All right. Thank you for joining us.